Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. Just back from being on the road, and we've got obviously the Middle East on edge, and that's an understatement. The region is a tinderbox right now, and by extension, the entire world is really on edge, waiting and dreading the possible Iranian axis response to Israel, and Israel taking out last week Hezbollah terror master Fuad Shukr, and of course, one of the top, probably the top overall leader of Hamas, the leader of their political wing, Ismail Haniyeh. So where do we stand now? We want to break that down today. Also, some very alarming threats against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from a member of the Iranian parliament, assassination threats, folks, and also Russia. And the former Russian defense minister, still a top official in the Russian defense establishment, very close to Vladimir Putin, is in Iran today. And I don't believe that's by coincidence. And I believe there are prophetic ramifications there. But let's start out with the breaking news and confirming what we've been talking about for the past 5 days or so. But Israel's foreign minister, Israel Katz is his name, said today that, quote, Iran has decided to attack Israel. Now, you might say, of course, we've known this for 5 days, but now it's been confirmed to Israel's foreign minister through a Hungarian intermediary. Obviously, Iran and Israel don't talk directly, but an Iranian official apparently told Hungarian officials, apparently officials from Hungary and Iran do have diplomatic relations, that yes, we are going to attack Israel. So the Hungarian foreign minister, in turn, told the Israeli foreign minister, and again, it confirmed what Israel and essentially the world already knew, that something is coming. Now, the big question we dug into on yesterday's newscast, and by the way, if you miss any of our newscast, our live streams, just check it out in our archives right here on the homepage. Go to newscast. They are all right there. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe, click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We're fast approaching 1 million subscribers for such a time as this, because we're bringing you these kinds of biblical, truthful, hard-hitting updates and with no apologies, unapologetically current events, news from a biblical perspective, focusing on the Middle East. Well, yesterday's newscast, again, you can look at it in our archives. We talked about the possibility of Israel striking preemptively against Iran. If we all know this is coming, and now an Iranian diplomat is confirming, yeah, it's coming. We've made the decision. We're going to attack Israel. Folks, wouldn't it make sense for Israel to strike first? And yesterday I drew the comparison to the Six-Day War, 1967. For weeks, everyone knew this was coming. Egypt and Syria were massed on Israel's borders, and Jordan eventually joined the fray as well. Everyone knew it was coming. And Lyndon Johnson, the president at the time, was attempting to restrain Israel. Don't you strike first, Israel. Much like now, Joe Biden attempting to restrain Israel from doing what it needs to do to defend the world's one and only Jewish state. Israel ignored Johnson at the end of the day, and Israel struck first, wisely, and achieved an historic, miraculous victory. 6 days. And folks, the war was effectively over in the south, at least with Egypt, on the first or second day, when Israel, as Egyptian fighter jets were still on the ground, Israel decimated the Egyptian Air Force in a surprise attack. Then you fast forward to 1973, the Yom Kippur War, where Israel, at that time, Henry Kissinger, the then Secretary of State under Richard Nixon, was pressuring Israel, don't strike first. And again, Egypt, Syria, they were massing on Israel's borders once again. Israel did not strike first in that instance, and the Yom Kippur War was a very dicey affair and a costly affair for Israel, in that Israel took some heavy early losses. Now, Israel eventually won the Yom Kippur War and had Cairo and Damascus, the IDF did, within its sights. If it wanted to go in, it ultimately didn't. Israel ultimately prevailed, but folks, over 2,000 Israeli soldiers killed, I believe, in the Yom Kippur War. That's a high price for a tiny nation like Israel. Israel waited. It didn't act. Some would say Israel's leadership, I don't want to use the word ignored, that's a bit strong, but maybe didn't take the intel seriously enough that an attack was imminent. That was 73. 67, preemption, 6-day war, miraculous, incredible victory in which Israel retook and reunified Jerusalem, took the Golan Heights, took the Sinai, eventually gave that back to Egypt. But if you're Israel right now, and what do you think, folks? We've got a very active chat right now. Let me know what you think. Why do you sit and wait for this? You know, the likelihood is that the rockets, the missiles, the Iranian drones will come from Western launchers in Western Iran. If you're Israel, why do you sit and wait for this? Yeah, Iron Dome is great. Iron Dome has a 90% success rate. I get it. And look, on April 13th, Israel, along with a coalition of nations, including the US, the UK, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, intercepted some 99% of those incoming Iranian projectiles. Remember, April 13th, unprecedented, first time ever that Iran launched a direct attack from Iranian soil, over 350 rockets, missiles, drones, 99% taken down. I get all that. And it was April 13th, and I don't use this word lightly. It was a miracle for some 350 projectiles to essentially all be shot down. Most of them didn't even enter Israeli airspace, although we had those infamous photos of Iranian incoming rockets over the Temple Mount in Jerusalem before they were shot down, intercepted. But why take the chance? Yeah, we trust in God, no doubt. And when it comes to Israel, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, neither slumbers nor sleeps. But why take the chance? Now you know. Iran is announcing to the world, we're going to do this. And why have your people, the people of Israel, on pins and needles for the past 5 days since the takeout of Ismail Haniyeh? 6 days now. When you know this is coming, and folks, Israeli officials, by the way, and we talked about this on the newscast yesterday, have been discussing preemptive strikes. Hey, why are we sitting here waiting for this? Why are we playing defense again? We played defense on April 13th. By a miracle of God, we took out 99% of those incoming projectiles. But why risk it again? Why play defense again? We know this is coming. Why not send our enemies a message and go on the offensive? Will Israel do it? I don't know. I can tell you the reason they wouldn't, because the United States, and by extension the West, but in particular the current United States government, is restraining Israel to the point where Israel is forced to fight with one hand behind its back. And that's the truth. Joe Biden told Israel on April 13th, and he is telling Israel now, or whoever's in charge, Kamala Harris, I don't know, whoever's in charge in the White House these days, is telling Israel, we will help you. And we have top U.S. military officials in Israel right now consulting with Israeli military and defense officials. But they're saying this. Well, it's coming from Biden himself. Israel will help you shoot down the incoming projectiles, but only if you don't go on the offense. If you strike first, Israel, then we're not going to help you, or we may not help you. But if you don't strike first, let it come to you. We'll help you shoot it all down. And that sounds great in theory, but suppose the success rate isn't 99% this time, folks. And suppose the magnitude, the sheer volume of these Iranian projectiles is larger. You can almost guarantee that this attack, look, Iran, after the failure of April 13th, and let me couch that a bit. Yes, it was a failure in terms of results. Look, 99% shot down, one young Bedouin girl horrifically was injured by shrapnel after one of those Iranian rockets fell in the Negev. But overall, you would say, wow, it was a big dud. No Israelis were killed. There was barely any damage to any Israeli sites, infrastructure, military installations at all. Total dud. And the world, or at least members of the free world, united, which was a good sign, in a coalition, in essence, shooting these projectiles down. So in one sense, you could say, what a dud. Big failure for Iran. But on the other hand, you got to look at that as a victory for Iran. Why do I say that? They got away with it. Folks, they got away with it. Iran did not pay any serious sort of consequences for an unprecedented attack, which, by the way, without that coalition help and without probably the most robust missile defense in the world, people would have died. many Israelis would have died, and there would have been a great amount of damage in Israel. And also, Israel, for all our Muslim viewers, Israel saved the Temple Mount that day, the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. Look at those photos. Iranian rockets and missiles above what Muslims say, even though Jerusalem's never mentioned in the Quran, mentioned hundreds upon hundreds of times in the Bible, never even mentioned in the Quran, but Muslims do consider Jerusalem their third holiest site. Well, Israel preserved the holy sites for Muslims in Jerusalem by intercepting those incoming projectiles on April 13th. I don't think it's a stretch to say that at all. Look at the photos. But a big victory for Iran in that they got away with it. Look, everyone said, well, how's Israel going to respond? Is this going to be the big war? And Israel responded in a limited fashion. Let's be honest. Striking a site in Natanz, which was symbolic in that a major Iranian nuclear facility is in Natanz. And Israel was sending a message of, hey, we can hit you anywhere, anytime, any place. Your nuclear facilities are fair game. We just hit you in Natanz and you couldn't stop it. Great. But is that the kind of deterrent that would dissuade the Iranian regime from pulling another April 13th? Clearly not. Why? Because Iran knows that the United States is restraining Israel. It full well knows. You think Iranians don't read the reports? That Joe Biden, after the successful aspect of April 13th, shooting down all those incoming projectiles, said to Bibi Netanyahu, reportedly, you got the win. Take the win. Just take the win. Don't strike Iran further. You got the win. Well, that's not how Iran sees it. Iran sees April 13th as probing and testing and probing weaknesses. They learned from it. Been almost 3 months now. They learned from it. 3 months, make that 4 months. And they're going to do it again to a larger degree. 350 may very well be 1,000 or more, 2,000 even, and spread out not in one day, but spread out over multiple days and coming in large volume from many directions. The entire Iranian ring of fire going up in flames. This is where we're at. I don't say this to scare anyone at all. Look, God is in control. Israel, even the modern history of Israel since 1948, the existence of Israel today is a miracle, folks. But we've had miracle after miracle. 1967, April 13th, the list goes on and on. But we also know about the time of Jacob's trouble that the Bible talks about, a day that's coming there too. It's not going to be easy, but Israel will prevail. But the Iranian regime sees the Biden administration restraining Israel, and they're saying, you know what? We can get away with this. We can pull this off, and we're banking on the West, led by the Biden administration, restraining Israel and preventing a massive Israeli response. That's what they're banking on. So we shall see. But what do you think of preemptive action? If you know someone is about to attack you, doesn't it make sense to strike them first? And you know, a war's coming eventually anyway. Eventually, Israel and Hezbollah are going to fight a full-blown war. No one wants to see it. But when you have probably at this point 200,000 rockets, missiles perched on your northern border in Lebanon, courtesy of Hezbollah, which is courtesy ultimately of Hezbollah's masters in Tehran, then it's unsustainable. You can't have 80 to 100,000 Israelis evacuated from northern Israel for almost a year now. It's unsustainable, folks. Israel is the size of the state of New Jersey, and northern Israel is essentially a ghost town. I was there a few months ago. No one's there. It's even worse now because Hezbollah has intensified the attacks since I was in Israel back in late February. You can't have it. You can't function as a nation economically if you have northern Israel and a huge chunk of southern Israel along the Gaza border, which has been shut down since October 7th. You can't have parts of your nation not functioning when you're as tiny as Israel, especially. It's unsustainable. People must go home to the north. They're living out of suitcases in hotels scattered throughout Israel. That's why Israel must act against Hezbollah. And if you talk to most Israelis, they would say it's long overdue. We should have done this months ago. Either you push Hezbollah back, in the very least, beyond the Litani River in Lebanon, which is about 18 miles north of that Israel-Lebanon border, or you say, you know what, this is it. Just as you've gone all in to crush Hamas in Gaza, and by extension, don't forget, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the other Iranian proxy in Gaza, also on the ropes now. If you're Israel, do you go all in and say, this is it, let's just crush Hezbollah now? We know a bloody war is coming. It's never, in a sense, it's never going to be quite a right time for this. Because no matter when Israel does it, it's going to be bloody, there's going to be casualties, it's going to be horrific. And we all know it, and no one wants to see it. But what's Israel's alternative? Rely on the UN to negotiate with Hezbollah, rely on Hezbollah to change its spots, or its masters in Tehran to change their spots and change their minds? This is a demonic obsession, ladies and gentlemen. They are hell, and I do mean hell, bent on destroying Israel. They will not stop. October 7th proved deterrence doesn't work with fully committed demonic hordes, orcs, who seek your destruction. Speaking of which, you see the title. Iran threatening directly now Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister. And by the way, side note, and we're going to get to Russia in a minute. What's Russia up to here? Can you say Gog, Magog? You might say, huh? What? The book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. Ever heard of it in your Bible? Might be a good time to pick it up. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But here's the news. I'm just reading this straight off my phone. I do not want to misquote. An Iranian member of parliament, folks, get this, is calling for the killing of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as revenge for the assassination of Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh. In an address today to the Iranian parliament, Mohammad Qasim Osmani called for a repeat of Operation True Promise. That was the April 13th barrage. He said that I hope, quote, I'm quoting him here directly, I hope that another Operation True Promise will be carried out as blood revenge. And then he says, we don't agree on anything less than Netanyahu's death. This is a member of the Iranian parliament giving a speech to Iran's parliament. This is the equivalent here, I'm in the United States, of a member of Congress standing up and saying this, calling for someone's death, or a member of the Israeli Knesset. And I'm sure he wasn't booed or censored, because in the Iranian parliament, they quite literally pump their fist and chant death to America and death to Israel on a regular basis. Osmani called Israel, quote, insolent for shedding the blood of a guest in Tehran. So Benjamin Netanyahu now, and folks, this brings up a question that I hate to even utter. Is Iran, and there's been some rumblings, is Iran going to look to target Israeli officials, Israeli defense, military officials, Israeli political leaders, members of the Knesset? It's possible. That's why you need to pray now more than ever for the peace of Jerusalem, for Israel's leaders, for guidance for Israel's leaders, and for God's hedge of protection over that land and the people. A divine iron dome over the people of Israel. Iran might be saying now, tit for tat. You've assassinated top members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. You've assassinated top members of Hezbollah, top commanders. Fuad Shukr was a right-hand man to Hezbollah leader Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah. You've assassinated Ismail Haniyeh, our dear brother, under our noses in Tehran, a complete embarrassment. You've taken out Mohsen Fakhrizadeh in November 2020, the father of Iran's nuclear weapons program. And Israel certainly was not adverse to Donald Trump taking out Qasem Soleimani, the arch terrorist, the not so dearly departed terror master in January 2020. So is Iran at the point now? And look, before April 13th, folks, here was the modus operandi for the Iranian regime when it wanted to strike back at Israel. Number one, employ its proxies, obviously. Usually, I mean, look, in the 18 years since the Second Lebanon War in summer of 2006, yes, 18 years have passed, hard to believe. Iran has held Hezbollah in reserve, right? And they've done that mainly because Hezbollah is their attack dog. If and when Israel attacks Iran's nuclear weapons facilities, that is when Iran takes Hezbollah off the shelf and employs Hezbollah. Hezbollah is the card up Iran's sleeve that they believe would deter Israel from attacking Iran's nuclear facilities. If you attack our nuclear facilities, we unleash Hezbollah. So mainly for the past 18 years, Hezbollah has held its fire until obviously October 2023, when this low-level war started along the northern border, but it is a war. Iran's main, and it's been the Houthis recently, right? The Shia militias in Iraq and Syria, always, these are all charter members of the Ring of Fire, but mainly Iran acted through Gaza. When Iran wanted to stir things up, it would tell Hamas and Islamic Jihad, fire some rockets and missiles, stir things up, do it now. So Gaza was a thorn in Israel's side for years. It all culminated, obviously, in a horrific way with the massacre of October 7th. Now Hamas and Islamic Jihad are on the ropes. And they can't really play much of a role in that ring of fire anymore, other than the occasional sporadic fire of some rockets, maybe a dozen, maybe a few dozen. That's it. Israel's got Hamas and Islamic Jihad so on the ropes in Gaza. I know there are conflicting reports of Hamas reconstituting itself, and Israel's kind of playing a game of whack-a-mole, right? Iran reconstitutes itself, maybe in central, northern Gaza. Israel goes back in, takes care of business. Long term, is that sustainable? I don't know. But I do know this, that right now, Hamas and Islamic Jihad are not reliable rings on the Ring of Fire. So in the past, Iran would employ the Ring of Fire, the proxies, and they'd have what I call implausible deniability. We didn't do it. It wasn't us. Even though Iran pulled the strings, training, funding, direction, support, etc., financial support. Or Iran would strike out at Israeli diplomatic posts around the world, Israeli missions, Israeli embassies, Jewish targets. But now a Rubicon has been crossed in all the wrong ways, and that Iran is completely emboldened, and they're going to attack from Iranian soil directly. And this will infuriate a lot of people for me to say this. I don't think this would happen if Donald Trump was in office. And you might say, I don't like Trump. Whether you like Donald Trump or you don't like Donald Trump. The enemies of Israel and America, I'm sitting in America, thought twice before acting up and acting out when he was in office. You may disagree, but when he was in office, there was not a major war in Europe, major war in the Middle East, with perhaps a horrific bigger war in the Middle East upon us, and China at the doorstep of Taiwan threatening. And a wide open border here in the United States where some 10 million people have flooded into this country, and we don't know where many of them are from, where they are now, their background, nothing. Up until 2020. Now all bets are off, and the world is on fire. Weak men create hard times. Weak men create hard times. And what we've seen in Washington, D.C. for the past 3.5 years is abject weakness. And the results you're seeing play out in real time before your very eyes right now. And you may say, you're getting political. I'm not getting political. This is real. It's reality, folks. This is no time to mince words. I will not hold my peace. This is the truth. And there are consequences to weakness and appeasement from the West. Whether you like it or you don't like it, the U.S. is still seen as the leader of the free world. You might say, the U.S., well, it is what it is, as they say. And if there's weakness in the United States at the top, it creates a vacuum, and the vacuum is filled by the world's worst actors. And you're seeing it right now. We've got a gathering storm of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea that's completely emboldened and on the march. And it's not clear what role the West will play alongside Israel here. I expect missile defense for sure, helping to intercept for sure, but at the same time, tying Israel's hands. And what you're doing when you do that is you're kicking the can down the road and inviting further aggression. The fact that Israel didn't react overwhelmingly after April 13th has created August 2024, has created the environment, the climate where Iran feels emboldened to do it again. You can't keep kicking the can down the road. Eventually, you're going to have to deal with this head on. It's unpleasant, but what's more unpleasant? Dealing with it now or dealing with it 2 years from now when, say, Hezbollah has expanded its rocket and missile arsenal by another 50,000 projectiles, including precision-guided, and Iran has nuclear weapons? Let me know what you think. Please comment. Better to deal with it now or later? We want to get to Russia. And one thing to mention, and one thing to ask you, look, I've been previously concerned about Israeli officials and leaders, government officials, traveling internationally to just forums to give speeches, etc., because of the likes of the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, and arrest warrants, this type of stuff being bandied about in terms of Israeli officials. Now do we have to worry about more sinister intentions towards Israeli leaders? According to this Iranian member of parliament, everything's on the table. So dangerous times, folks. Stay in prayer. It works. It's not trite when I say that. Prayer actually works. It really does. I've seen it in my life. I hope you've seen it in your life. It actually works. God actually hears you. And it really works. If you're in his will, he'll work all things together for your good. If you're in his will, if you're called according to his purpose. Okay, not to get off on my preacher hat on. Okay, Russia. We're talking, maybe I will keep the preacher hat on a little bit because we're talking Bible prophecy right now and Russia's role in it. Now, I mentioned that the war of Gog and Magog. If you're a first-time viewer, you might be scratching your head. Bear with me. The book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39, lays out a future war. The prophet Ezekiel says it will come about in the latter, L-A-T-T-E-R, latter days, where a coalition of nations will come against Israel. Now, it uses some ancient names for these nations. One is Persia, which is modern-day Iran. Another is Gomer and Beth Togarmah, very funny-sounding names. It's modern-day Turkey. Meshach, Rosh, Tubal, I believe referring to Russia. And the funny thing is, or not so funny, Russia, Iran, and Turkey are now aligned now more than ever before. And they've always been at each other's throats throughout the centuries. Now they have a close alliance. Russia, Turkey, and Iran, the three top nations, I believe. And look, if you disagree with my take, fine. It's not a salvation issue. We can disagree on the prophetic, okay? You might have a different take on Bible prophecy than I do. It's okay. We still all love the Lord. It's not a salvation issue. Don't get all worked up. This is my take on it. That Russia, Iran, and Turkey will be at the head of that latter days, remember, invasion force. Last week, the Turkish president, Recep Erdogan, for the first time ever, who's viciously anti-Israel, publicly talked about invading Israel. That's number one. Number two, obviously, Iran's been talking about destroying Israel for years. Number three, Russia and Iran have never been this close. It's a full-blown, all-out formal defense and military alliance where Iran is now supplying Russia with surface-to-surface missiles and thousands of drones, attack drones, that Russia is using to great effect in Ukraine. And don't you think Russia is going to return the favor eventually? Folks, it's not a situation where Iran's doing this out of the goodness of its heart. This is a quid pro quo relationship where Russia has to give something in return. And we see a sense of that today. I'm just reading this straight off my phone. That's why I'm looking down. Top Russian defense official is in Tehran today to cultivate stronger security ties. The ex-defense minister and the head of the National Security Council for Russia, Sergei Shoigu, is meeting with the new Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian and other top Iranian officials. Wow. Now, do you think that's coincidental timing, folks? That Russia's top, he was a defense minister. He's still at the very top of Russia's defense and military hierarchy, Sergei Shoigu. Do you think it's a coincidence that today of all days, where look, U.S. officials are saying, and Israeli officials are saying, within the next 24 to 48 hours, Iran could launch this attack against Israel. Do you think it's a coincidence that a top Russian defense official is there today? Come on. I certainly don't. There have been persistent reports over the past few days, and I haven't been able to verify this, but there's stuff floating around online, and I'm not one to throw out stuff thrown online, of, let's just say, Russian military assistance to Iran. I wouldn't doubt it. That's not an offbeat, off-the-wall kind of thing. Russia and Iran, again, have a tight military alliance now. But Shoigu is in Iran today. And you really think that's a coincidence? As a show of solidarity with Iran. Solidarity against who? Against Israel. Folks, the Russia-Israel relationship, for anyone banking on Russia and Israel mending fences, it's not going to happen. Why? And you might say, well, wait a minute. There's some 1 million Russian-speaking Israelis, and they made Aliyah in the early 90s after the Soviet Union collapsed. Israel has strong ties to Russia. In many ways, it does. But if you're Israel, you can't get around the fact that Russia is aligned openly with your closest enemies, led by Iran, not to mention Hezbollah, not to mention the Assad regime in Syria, not to mention Putin. In the past 2 weeks, there were rumblings he was going to supply weapons to the Houthis in Yemen. He's all in with the Iranian axis, folks. And if you're all in with Israel's greatest enemies, then you can't also be all in with Israel. And that's where we're at right now. It's plain common sense. It's only going to get worse. And if and when Israel crushes Hezbollah, strikes Iran's nuclear facilities, Isaiah 17, we're talking Gog, Magog, Ezekiel 38, 39. Look at the book of Isaiah, chapter 17, which talks about a day where Damascus will cease to be a city, one of the oldest inhabited cities in the world, the capital of Syria. Are these at the doorstep, these events? Perhaps. And how would Russia react to that, to see their dear brothers in Iran and the Assad regime and Hezbollah so humbled and embarrassed and weakened? Russia wouldn't like that very much, which brings you to the war of Gog and Magog. From the perspective of, say, Iran, Turkey, is this a war of vengeance in their view against Israel? After Israel strikes a stunning victory against the Iranian axis? Perhaps. Here's the good news. That latter days confederation, Russia, Turkey, Iran, it sounds so scary. They don't get very far. Spoiler alert. They meet their demise on the mountains of Israel. I'm not going to give away anything else. I want you to go read the word of God. Read Ezekiel 38 and 39 and see for yourself how it all pans out for this latter days confederation that comes against Israel. Not very good. And that's encouraging. And it's encouraging to read, actually, to take your Bible and actually read to the end of it, read to the back of the book, and Israel is still standing. It ain't going to be easy. Anything but. But Israel survives and ultimately thrives and prevails. But it's going to be nasty getting there. But that's where we come in as prayer warriors, as the watchmen and women on the wall who watch this newscast on a daily basis. Can't thank you enough. Keep it all in prayer. Stay encouraged. Hey, Jesus never said it was going to be easy. He never said, you know what, until I return, sit on your couch, flip on the tube, grab some potato chips, and just sit there and wait for me. No. God expects us to be proactive. Proactive. Jesus, what did he say to the disciples? Go and make disciples of all nations. Not sit and twiddle your thumbs. Go make disciples of all nations. And in terms of being proactive, the best thing you can do right now is pray. I said earlier, it's not trite. It's not cliche. Prayer works. And I believe in the case of Israel, it's worked many, many times since 1948, since Israel's miraculous rebirth. And let's go back thousands of years. Keep it all in prayer. We will come to you with more updates as we have them. So keep it right here. Make sure to subscribe. Until tomorrow, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.